Waiting for it to start.
All right.
And making sure. All right. Now we're live. Hello everyone. This is Mr. Brass and here I am with Vernon. He is, from last time I checked, a musician and a men's rights activist. He's also an objectivist. Um, say hi to everyone, Vernon.
Hi, everyone.
uh, so, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about myself. Well, I'd like to say that first and foremost, above everything, I try to be. I practice individualism the best I can and be my own person. Now, what I mean by this is that I don't want to let extraneous things and uh, details surrounding my background and such define me. Like, for instance, I had a hard time fitting in life due to the fact that I was biracial, and I grew up. I was born and grew up in Japan, actually. And it's when you're as young, when you're like up to preteen, it's really hard to, shall we say, fit in. And it's a much bigger deal when you're that much younger, right? And once we moved to the United States, I'm a U.S. citizen born abroad, by the way, so I am a U.S. citizen. Um, and
Are
and
oh,
during my teenage years, it was still hard to fit in the other way around. So so I had to kind of, I took it upon myself to just, let you know let it be about me, not about my the other half of the race I am, or something like that. It's kind of off the top of my head. That's one big way to describe me. All the things that fall from that are just extra details that just flow from that.
so you're, I would assume you're half Asian, right?
That's right, half Japanese.
Yeah, half. And what else?
Caucasian. Caucasian
Uh,
American. Yeah.
so you're way privileged.
Well, let's see. The the fact that I'm an Asian canceled out by the fact that I'm white, makes me kind of like a zero almost. So I don't know if that means I'm super privileged or in limbo. I don't really know.
Well, Asian is the new white.
Well, oh yeah, yeah. I suppose that sort of makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Well, basically, if you're part of a group that's on the top of the socioeconomic ladder or perceived to be on top of the socioeconomic ladder, you get all the cookies.
Definitely, I like cookies so much.
Um, so what type of music are you into?
So, I suppose in simple terms, I'm big into the like progressive style rock and metal. Now, I have problems with the word progressive because sometimes it's really about something groundbreaking. Other times it's like mimicking other progressive bands. So it's a bit dubious as to what I really call what I use that to describe the kind of music I like. But if I narrowed it down to bands, I'm a big fan of bands like Dream Theater, Threshold, Symphony X, Yes, Rush, Emerson, Lake and Palmer is a big one, King Crimson, and really I branch off a lot. Like when I grew up listening to country, so there's some influence there, believe it or not. And generally speaking, I'm not a complete yes man when it comes to music, but I'm also pretty open to it. Like New Age is big. I'm a big Guitar fan. I'm very fond of synthesizer heavy stuff like synth leads and such. And
That's
yeah.
nice. Um, so what I heard you're an objectivist. I've been doing some research on that for a while now. I thought it was interesting to see someone that holds to that philosophy. What exactly got you into it?
So I guess when I was in my high school days, I was kind of winding down from being what I personally call a Star Trek socialist, right? Like, basically kind of having this vision of the future in which nobody has to work and stuff like that, right? But I was kind of winding down from that one. It was just a phase, and I was basically, but even then, I was kind of, hoping for some kind of individualist sort of direction. I thought the individual was a an important thing even then. I just realized that it didn't really fit into the socialist thing. So it was a bit of so I went to the library. It was a bit of a toss up as to which quote unquote individualist author I should read. Was it something by Nietzsche that I would pick up, or something by Ayn Rand? Because those I was kind of in the loop as something. Those were two individuals who spoke on the subject, and I chanced it with The Fountainhead, and I could not put the book down. I was just hooked. So that was my start in it, and my evolution kind of took years. I mean, started from being a fan of her work to her interviews, and actually, it wasn't till the what year was it? The tail end of 2013 that I officially classified myself as an objectivist. Actually, um, so yeah, it was just a long evolution. I didn't decide to call myself an objectivist from the start. It's something that I had to kind of really mull over, see if it's right or not. And even then, I had to kind of really figure out, to not be a sycophant. Like don't just be a follower. Like take the philosophy and make it yours. So that's really and you'll notice that I say I don't. It's not that I'm identifying as an objectivist. I'm classifying myself as one, which means I basically match whatever she has to say about it. And all things considered, I fall under the category of objectivist because of my viewpoints. I'm not having to change my views just so I can fit into the objectivist philosophy. It's just that all the stuff I do match with, that makes me so. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So basically, what happens is instead of you're fitting yourself to match the philosophy, you're finding a philosophy that already fits you.
That's basically the way to put it, really. And it's not like everything Ayn Rand says goes or anything like that, right? And if there's some parts of the philosophy that can't be improved towards the objectivist end, maybe I had a better idea than the original objectivist did, or the status quo objectivism does. I'll pursue that. Like, some differences include that I'm actually leaning more of a anarcho-capitalist side than the more minarchistic side that objectivists tend to take. And some other differences of opinion include, well, uh, objectivists are probably more on the pro-choice side, but recently I've been more of a anti-abortion side myself. And also there's some disagreements on intellectual property argument as well. So it's not like I'm I have to kind of follow the status quo every step of the way. I do have my own opinions, but I believe this is not in contradiction of me being an objectivist or anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very hard. I would imagine it's very hard for you to be an objectivist when it comes to your apparent, from what I've read on Twitter, your raging misogyny. So, you know, I don't know how you could see a woman as such an intellectual that you'd be willing to follow her philosophy.
Well, I mean, Ayn Rand was kind of like the one woman in history that I could think of in which she she wanted an unsacrificed man, and it had wanted men to be unsacrificed. It's probably the one time that a woman, or really anyone, really had that kind of view.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a big thing. I think since, history wasn't really Ayn Rand's strong suit, I think she failed to take into consideration Western notions of where that all comes from.
Could you elaborate more on that?
Well, it's more because, like, she was more tackling it more from a philosophical side rather than going to the roots of it. Um, which I was okay. That's philosophy was more of her strong suit, and well, basically, people don't really realize that at least in the West, our notions of sacrifice, well, they don't exclusively come from this. They have been heavily influenced by Christian notions of it.
Well, I don't know if she had necessarily a disconnect on that, because I think she had a good grasp on it. It's just that she still didn't agree with it. Like, for example, one thing I noticed about Christianity is that, it made, so Christianity to me is basically, to sum it up, be like Christ. But what is Christ that we're supposed to be? He's nailed to the cross for the sins of others. And I know for a fact that she was really uh, uh, put off by that fact. The supposedly ideal man, who is Jesus Christ, is murdered by his own religion, so to speak. So that's the way she interpreted it, and I think it makes sense. It's from that which we have this culture in which self-sacrifice is so extolled, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that, and I mean, well, obviously, male sacrifice happened long before Christianity was a thing. Um, Before Christianity, I believe it was sort of just a fact that people sort of just accepted as a reality. They didn't really make a moral case for it. Um, but once Christianity came into being, it became more of like not just it became more of a moral imperative to do that sort of thing, rather
Yeah,
rather than just a byproduct of, say, the environment you had to live in.
right. Yeah,
Which
that sounds right.
that's two different things, because obviously in like, even in our DNA and stuff, it's our environment does lead men to be more self-sacrificial to women in some ways.
I don't know if
But
I agree with that, actually. I think that's more conditioning, because we've been told it's a virtue. So we kind of have, if anything's impulse, it's this kind of, if anything is so-called instinctual, it's this idea that we want to kind of have approval from someone. Now, this is bad, by the way. I think we shouldn't live strictly for others' approval. So this is something that we need to grow out of. But the point still stands. It's something that, I could be accepted as a man if I sacrifice myself. So it's not this kind of argument by hardwiring that I tend to hear a lot from the men's rights, my own side, but the men's rights side here. I kind of refer to this thing as biogynocentrism. This sort of preoccupation with biology driving men to sacrifice, when it's more like a social scam in operation.
I mean, personally, for me, I see it more alongside. I mean, I don't see it as one or another. Um, like I see it as sort of it commingles, because obviously we make societies that fit our biology in many ways. We need to eat, and we have limited resources, and so we tend to work with engaging our appetites with what we have available. So if you live in a fishing village where the only thing that you can really eat is fish and whatever you can plant, you're sort of, you're going to be saying a lot of things about fish, because that's what you have to eat, and that's your culture.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as like a purely biological thing. I think biology, it, like, I would say it constructs a root, like it promotes like a sort of impulse towards something, but social conditioning can um either modify that or it can overturn it.
The thing is, I think the fact that, human beings actually have volition, and kind of like the ability to kind of ask the existential question of what is my purpose in this universe, that is very understated in these sort of discussions because they seem to have control, or at least can possibly train themselves into controlling uh, those, again, what we call instincts. So I think this is something that we can be more conscious about and instead think of some better things to do with our time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Obviously, I'm not a biological determinist. I I think that's almost as completely as wrong as just a pure social constructivist.
Yeah, I
Like
get what you mean.
with both extremes. I think if you go to either side, it can be a bit stupid because if you say for one, it's pure like in order to say it's perfectly socially constructed, to some extent you have to ignore the fact that we are to some extent animals, rational ones, granted, but we face similar limitations in many ways.
I'm
Like,
definitely not saying that we're, it came, all this came out of nowhere, right? It's a complete fabrication or what? No, no, of course not. Yeah, but what makes what
yeah,
makes humans the way they are is that uh, if we're talking about evolution, what's the one important thing that they've evolved is the ability to transcend their past evolution.
yeah. Well, that and self-preservation.
Self-preservation, and again, not in this mindless way. It's more of an existential question now. It's not just uh, you know just saving your own skin. It's just trying
Well,
to ha- inject some meaning into your life and not just let it die off and blow the sand into the wind, kind of a deal.
well, yeah, that or what they call like or at least self-preservation is either saving yourself or saving your genes.
Saving your genes part, it's more unconscious, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
like say when we're talking about uh, uh, we're talking survival, we're talking about propagation. When one has sex, like the fact that you must your genetic lineage must move on is not the forefront on your mind.
yeah,
So right, but I mean, it's more a buried some more of an unconscious sort of a thing. But the way people talk about it, it's just I don't really like how they kind of bring that to the forefront. It's like nobody actually has sex if they weren't going to reproduce or something like that, which is clearly not the case right now.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's true. It is subconscious to a large extent. I mean, for example, if let's say, for example, do you have any kids?
I don't have any kids at present.
Uh, so let's say you have a son, and he's being stupid and he's running off into traffic, and you see a car that's about to hit him, and so you jump and push him out of the way, and you end up getting hit by the car instead. Well, in that circumstance, people would say, well, obviously we would say you did a right thing by saving your son's life. But the very biological determinist would say, well, the reason why he did that was because if he let his son get killed, then that would kill off his genes.
Yeah, that's such bullshit. It's like you obviously care about the son, right? And the thing is, since this is a sort of thing that should not have had to happen. Nobody should have had to die. So so people need to be reminded that it's a tragedy. Like don't just celebrate the fact that the son survived. Like at least be sad that the dad had to get himself killed for that.
Yeah. I mean, that is true. And so, I mean, I always found it because I know that Ayn Rand wasn't a what people would call a feminist in her day. Um, Although I have heard some people that spout some things that she apparently said that rang true of feminism, but
Well, go ahead. Do you have any examples?
not on me. It's just something I heard people say, like where they would say that on like I think it's more because they said, well, look, she's a philosopher, well, a amateur philosopher, and she's a woman, so that means that means she must have been a feminist back then. And I'm like, no.
Not at all. It's like she thought that the women's liberation movement was phony, basically. So, and if anything, like I don't think you can reconcile feminism with basically the borderline man worship she was practicing in her fiction and her philosophy and everything. So, like she was, yeah. I would get the idea that she was not fond of feminism, and those who say that Ayn Rand was a sort of a feminist, they're kind of one of those modern, people who don't know the actual misandric origins of feminism, right? It's like the Declaration of Sentiments, that sort of thing, and they think that feminism is just about just people being equal or something like that. So very naive feminists are probably saying that Ayn Rand was an early feminist, but she decidedly was not. So.
Yeah. And that is sort of a thing that I like to get to is because I know a thing about Ayn Rand is that her philosophy was more of promoting what like many in the men's right movement would call a healthy degree of selfishness.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't really know a whole lot in the men's movement that cite Rand's a whole lot. Now, granted, I've only been in the movement like 2 years, by the way, so I don't know everybody in the movement. And as far as I can tell, I'm the resident objectivist men's rights guy.
Well, I've heard objectivist term, and I don't know if they personally subscribe to Ayn Rand, but I know that they do use some of like the philosophy that she advocated.
Yeah, I do know that going Galt was an analogy sometimes used for MGTOW, I think is a good analogy. Basically, I consider MGTOW to just being men living independently. That's what going your way is all about. It's not just about the relationship with the women or lack thereof. It's just about making your own decisions and not living for gynocentric expectations of self-sacrifice. So there is a match with the objectivist notion of going Galt and MGTOW philosophy, for instance, and in general men's rights red pill ideas.
I know Ayn Rand got a lot of her philosophy from Aristotle, but I always pegged her more alongside Stoic philosophy.
There's a lot of commonality with Stoic philosophy. I think if I were to kind of pinpoint any real difference between them, it's that Stoicism seems to me focused on like not really resisting the inevitable per se. There's more emphasis on that, is my understanding of Stoicism. Like, you're going to die, so don't fight it, kind of. For instance, I don't know. I'm not the Stoic here, so I could be getting that wrong. But whereas objectivism sees things like death as unimportant, basically. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that'd be more Epicurean in that sort of mindset. But I always see Stoicism because Stoics, a big thing of Stoic philosophy is rationality. Aristotle does focus on it, but the difference between Aristotle and Stoicism was that Aristotle was like, look, yes, we are rational animals, and we are rational animals, and we need to be virtuous, but there's also these external things to the side that need to be met as well. While Stoics just said, not those external. It's just about being virtuous and being rational. And we need to keep our emotions in check so that we don't, harm our rational side.
I see. And you're saying that's the Aristotelian sort of deal.
I mean, that's the difference between Stoicism and Aristotelian worldview.
I see. All right. Right.
Yeah. So basically,
go ahead.
Aristotle, he believed virtue wasn't enough by itself. You needed something like external factors to come into play. While Stoics were like, no, you just need the virtues, and the virtue is being rational.
I see.
I see that sort of thing in like not exactly with Ayn Rand, but I think I see more like flavoring of that in Ayn Rand's philosophy.
I think it's a fair assessment to make. Uh, what Ayn Rand's philosophy basically prioritizes is the fact that, whereas most other philosophies would kind of scorn at the idea of you being your own endpoint in your virtuous activity. Objectivism would say instead that, not only it's okay to have yourself as your own endpoint, uh, it should probably be your first. If you're going, if you're going to care about anyone, you've got to know how to care yourself first and actively practice that. Else, you're just living for the sake of others, which is tantamount to a kind of spiritual slavery.
Yeah. I mean, that is true. I mean, besides, you're not really good to anyone. Like, how are you going to make everyone else happy if you can't make yourself happy and you have much more knowledge about yourself than you do other people?
Right. It's just about practicing. Uh, it's I've been trying to kind of put the philosophy into my own words across my years, and because that's the best way to kind of own the philosophy instead of just parroting out like somebody else's points, right? But it's really about crafting your life and owning it. It really ties into the whole libertarian idea of self-ownership. And from that, that's the basis which you interact with others, right? So it's a non-parasitic social relationship between others that you can practice, assuming everybody is marginally consistent with the same philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what made you connect? What gets you into connecting Ayn Rand's philosophy with, let's say, the men's rights movement?
Well, so one big term that uh, needs to be said more. It's not as said as much as I'd like, is gynocentrism. And that's basically the idea that, I mean, you can probably guess this, right? It's just centering everything around and prioritizing women
Yeah.
above and often at the expense of men. Well, I've come to define gynocentrism as the demand for male altruism. And basically, this is just the expectation that men are sacrificial, disposable beings, and who is the receiving end of this sacrifice? Well, guess what? It's the women of society. And so I think the men's rights movement could use a big infusion of this kind of awareness that gynocentrism is the demand for you to be selfless, and the end point of that selflessness will be womankind. And both neo-traditionalism and feminism have been the receiving ends of this one. They were able to kind of in one fell swoop just grab the attention and the labor of males just like that. It was practically handed to them on a silver platter. And I think objectivism is a big match with red pill philosophy, because it teaches men to say no, and it teaches men to say, I have my own standards that I'm not going to sacrifice just because a woman wants me to do otherwise.
Yeah. And which is pretty funny because I might get occasionally some hateful stuff from both what they call them, POAs, pickup artist, PUA,
Mm-hmm. Right,
pickup
right.
artists and incels. I'll get stuff from both of them because the fact I say I don't view them as really that much different than gynocentrists, because they're basing a lot of their life off of like the women they get with.
That's basically this. I have the same mind about the PUAs about this. It's about playing that gynocentric game just to rake up points, and kind of defining yourself uh, uh, by how much you've been able to do this. Now, I'll have to say that I want to go a bit easy on the incels, however, because I'm not going to consider not being laid a crime.
Yeah,
Right. Like so when it comes to incels, it's more of a case by case basis.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
right.
I'm not overly harsh on them. I just think it's part of the mindset I think they need to grow out of that'll happen over time. Um, like I believe it's more of like the thing about PUAs and incels that does get me is because they're basically basing their well-being and their status off of the women that they can get with or the women that they're failing to get. It's
Right.
all women centered. It's not
Yeah.
really they're not really reflecting on themselves.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to like as a like I consider myself in more in the men's rights where I'm trying to get men to see themselves as actually having self-worth.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's what a men's rights activist should do. To be sure, it's basically uh, encouraging men to live on their own terms, basically, instead of how much they could please a woman or how much approval you get from a woman. You know.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I'm not going to be overly harsh on them. I give a critique of it, um, which I think many incels once they realize that sort of thing, I don't say they get over it per se because I think a lot of them have many more traumas that are bothering them outside of that. I mean, because I mean, I personally say this: it's that the amount of actual, like, if we use just the dictionary definition or what the etymology of incel stands for, involuntary celibate, I don't think there's actually many of them that are actually exist because any man with $100 in his pocket can get a woman.
Right.
It's not many of these men, it's not about having sex with a woman, that it's about having like a relationship with a woman.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I do. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. I keep interrupting you.
oh, it's fine. I understand that. I think it's less about the sex part and it's more about the relationship that they're missing out on.
Yeah, I have to say that that sounds about right. Now, yeah, because one thing I did ask at some point to no one in particular, I don't remember the occasion, but um, like how well can you measure incelness really? Because if you haven't access to say the sex industry, and I mean the actual sex industry, I don't think OnlyFans is the sex industry. Um, Basically, if you've got some way to negotiate that, then you can't really define yourself too closely as an involuntary celibate. And of course, you've got pornography too. So there are some ways to kind of measure how much or how much you're not celibate per se, right? And yeah, so it does have to kind of boil back down to the fact that they're in a relationship, I suppose. The whole pair bonding thing, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a big problem more so like what's funny is like it's not really funny, it's more sad, but feminists and the media will just demonize many of these men that are in this predicament, but many of them they have mental illnesses or some deformity
Hmm.
that's
Right.
them making it difficult for them to find relationships.
Right.
And instead of like what they could be doing is they say, well, maybe we need to talk to women and say maybe you need to start giving maybe some of these guys a chance before just outright dismissing them.
Right.
But they're not going to do that, of course.
Well, I think there is one way that they're kind of halfway there already is because they don't care about what women think a lot of times. At least so they'll profess. If that's true, then they're kind of halfway there because um, that's sort of an attractive thing is that they don't. Ironically, is that they don't care about what women think. They just being themselves, and supposedly, that's what is supposed to be attractive in a man in most cases. Now, I can't really speak to that too much. Like, though I do notice that my own success in life started happening when I started caring less about uh, what women wanted me to be, and I just became myself and just acted without apology, basically. that's kind of how I started to kind of move forward in that particular aspect of my life. I become more unabashed, and I think more men are capable of doing that. And there's a lot to be said about being yourself. Like, it's not being yourself in the way that you're this garbage person and that's okay. You just let it fester and things like that. No, no, no. I'm talking about that bare minimum of personal worth, right? And all the good details about you that don't necessarily measure up with society's expectations. Well, no, fuck society, really. Just craft yourself in the way that you see fit, because you've got your one life. That's the life you got, and that's the way to express yourself as an individual, as a masculine entity, and as a man.
Yeah. Well, there is no such thing as a society. There are just individuals pursuing their own interests in groups.
Hmm.
So I actually think that phrase originated. I don't know if it did originate from her, but I think that originated from Margaret Thatcher,
Mm,
where
interesting.
where she basically said there's no such thing as a society. It's just individuals coming together on certain
Hmm.
projects.
Yeah, and Rand, she probably didn't originate the expression, but she did say in a Donahue interview that there really is no such thing as society. It's all of us. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what she said. So that's what she said.
Yeah. I mean, well, and the fact is that rationality is an inherently individualistic thing.
Hmm.
I
Right,
can't I can't we don't have one collective consciousness or one rationality.
right,
It's all individuals.
hmm, right.
Um,
I mean, it's not to say that there isn't logic that we all can derive from that works in an objectively proper way to kind of assess something. That's why we have the proper sciences and
yeah,
everything, and we have logic and everything. But aside, but yeah, that doesn't mean that we have this collective brain or anything, this collective soul.
yeah. Um, so I remember. I'm trying to think. Are you familiar with some of the institutions that are based off of Ayn Rand, like the Ayn Rand Institute or
There's the Ayn Rand Institute, and then there's the Atlas Society. I'm not sure of any other kind of offshoots or anything like that. Truth be told, I don't follow objectivist organizations so much. I basically kind of branch off and just do my own thing. I haven't been much of a joiner in that respect, though I am a member of a Voice for Man. So I guess my say what you want about that, but
Yeah. I used to be subscribed to like the newsletter of the Ayn Rand Institute and
mhm.
subscribed to their YouTube channel, but they became cringe to me because they started taking liberal positions on things.
Well, they're sadly kind of going, specifically the Ayn Rand Institute. They're kind of going the way to me of like a weird fusion between uh, a typical conservative and a Sam Harris style, what do you
Progressive.
call him, new atheist.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's sort of a weird fusioned uh, hybrid offspring of that.
Yeah. I can definitely see that because I know recently they were basically pushing for the typical progressive position of abortion on demand all 9 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, that's the abortion thing was probably one of the bigger errors
Mm.
of the of Ayn Rand. I actually would claim in response that it is anti-objectivist actually, because a lot of objectivism, aside from being pro-individual, it's the fact that it's a bit. I'm not trying to confuse this with humanism, but basically that human that has that very potential of being an individual, it needs more respect, even as an unborn state, in which where now we're talking about the natural trajectory of a human being coming into being, basically, and that in itself needs the respect in its own right, basically.
Yeah.
And a second way that it's anti-objectivist is that it promotes non-accountability on the part of the woman, because the talk about agency and autonomy, the bodily autonomy thing when it comes to this particular subject, is the fact that the autonomy and agency is all done during the sexual act. It's on you to either decide to get into something in which a conception can happen or prevent it from the get-go. When the conception starts and you screwed up, you failed to make the necessary precautions. That's on you. That's the responsibility you're going to have to assume, because there's no individualist philosophy worth its salt that says you don't have to take responsibility for your own actions. You know.
And I mean, but don't you know, Vernon, that abortion has to be legal all 9 months up on demand, because otherwise women can't pursue their own happiness.
So it depends on. So here's the thing. Women's happiness. Since we're talking about we're talking about convenience rather than actual happiness in that virtuous objectivist sense, right? It's like, and here's the ironic thing about about that, because it's more convenient to actually practice safe sex procedures. I'm not the abstinence advocate here. It's like everything you can do to prevent sorry, a bit of a stammer on my part, to prevent conception. That's easier than the big hassle that is the abortion process, at the very least. Never mind the fact that it's tearing apart an actual second entity here. Like, say I were a woman that really wanted quite a bit of sex, right?
Yeah.
If I were in that position, I'd be really hard line about the whole contraception thing, because why would I want to go through the trouble of a very violating sort of more intimate than it should be procedure of an abortion,
Which is why I've always found it sort of because here's what they'll say. They'll say, well, we have to allow abortion for rape. And I'm like, for one, I don't really see how telling a rape victim that they have to go through a procedure that's going to be done most likely by a man to the same that were just not that long ago violated is somehow going to help.
Right.
For one, and two, we're talking about allegations of rape.
Yeah.
Because unless there has been at least at the bare minimum, there's been some sort of DNA that's been in there. We don't know if she's telling the truth, but as far as we know, she could have just said, "Oh man, my boyfriend broke up with me, and I'm due in 3 weeks to give birth. I'm just going to go up to the abortion clinic and say that I was raped, and then get the abortion."
Right. Yeah, they're basically aiming for the total non-accountability of womankind and funding it with men's tax dollars, which is my understanding that the overturning Roe versus Wade, that was a step in the right direction to kind of get rid of that. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, like many people I've seen people on the left and right that they overstate what Roe, like overturning it did. The only thing that it's really done is it's just put the power back into the state's hands.
Yeah, that's exactly what it did. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if you live in California, your rights to abortion did not change at all. Whereas if you lived maybe in the more southern states, maybe they changed a bit.
Yep.
But for the most part, they didn't. They, for example, in all states that I'm aware of, they all have like an exception for the woman's life. And I mean, and I like to point this out, even the Taliban has an exception for the woman's life when it comes to abortions.
Right.
So this notion that people just want to see women die is stupid.
Yeah, they come up with a lot of mental gymnastics to really pin us as the bad guys. They want us to be so misogynistic that they have something to rally against. So
Yeah. Well, that and they're being transphobic because it's not just women that get pregnant.
right, yeah.
So I also find it funny because I mean it's not really so much funny, but I do like in general. I believe you like before this, you actually retweeted a tweet that I put out
Mhm.
where showed the hypocrisy in more traditionalist conservative thinking, where, for example, they'll like like I remember you got on Matt Walsh for this as well.
Oh yeah, and before that, I've gone on Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, and for like I put out a little tweet where I said conservatives 1 minute. They're saying these trans rights activists are advocating for the mutilation of children. What kind of sick freaks can advocate for the mutilation and harming of children? And I put out next conservatives next minute. It's like, oh, I just got back from the hospital of giving my son a circumcision, and I picked up some of my older son's Ritalin.
Mm-hmm. That's see, they're the ones using the terms mutilation, right?
Yeah.
They're the ones using the term child mutilation. So that's why I'm on their ass here. Like, the average, North American, I said in my past video I could power New York City if it meant that, for a week, if it meant that calling out every North American that was ignorant enough to believe that circumcision is no big deal, generated energy. But beside that, but that's why I'm really mad at these people like Matt Walsh, because this is hypocrisy. By the way, like I know you've kind of countered, say that's not really hypocrisy, but if they're talking about child mutilation, then it is.
Yeah.
Then it is hypocrisy. So
Well,
go ahead.
It's hypocrisy for many like conservatives who don't want it to be a purely religious matter.
Mhm.
And I said, and you're right, if it's not a purely religious matter, then it is just straight up hypocrisy because I don't see a way you justify it elsewhere.
They need to kind of, and here's the thing about it being a religion. Supposedly in Christianity, you're not even supposed to have that circumcision at all. So,
Yeah.
Right. Now, the other thing before this whole trans thing happened, is that I've been trying to call out the hypocrisy of pro-lifers, actually. And remember here, I'm anti-abortion at present, but I don't like these conservatives saying that a fetus has a right to life, only for their male ones to go into the chopping block here.
Yeah.
So that's another hypocrisy.
Well, yeah. Oh, by the way, I got like a little joke.
Yeah.
What was Jesus's favorite band?
Mm.
9 Inch Nails.
Oh wow. Were they all 9 inch? Was he nailed on 9 inch?
Well, Jesus was the only virgin to die getting nailed.
Oh wow.
I
Hey, and they say be like Christ, so I don't know what to say about that.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, if you ever see, because you have seen my Twitter multiple times where I sort of take shots at pretty much everyone.
It seems to be the case, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've even gone after pro-lifer. I've been actually banned, I mean, not banned, blocked by like 2 pro-lifers that I was friends with previously
Right.
because I was just more or less. Because I don't know what they were expecting out of me because they know I'm not a Christian for one.
Mhm.
And another thing is they also know that I'm not a traditionalist. So they knew that
Right.
ahead of time. And when I was pointing out just how like absurd some of the traditionalist stuff was, they blocked me.
Mm. Yeah. Well,
Mm.
the more possessed they are in one ways in which uh, call something out and they just can't respond it without being a complete, like being exposed as a hypocrite, then that's their one option is to block you.
Yeah. So I mean, which is I've always just found that just pretty funny because I go after pretty much everyone. I mean, I've even made fun of autistic people, and I'm autistic.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, because I think that's the like if you can't really laugh at yourself, you can't really have the right to laugh at anyone else.
Hmm.
Um. So I'm a take no prisoners kind of guy. I go after everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I get you.
I remember I remember you. I think you've been doing interview shows as well.
Oh, I try to interview a lot of people. So I've interviewed. So I got Hannah Wallen on the show. I've got William Costello, who talks a lot about incels and stuff like that. I've interviewed Segni Midtow. Elizabeth Hobson's been a frequent guest, but she's been kind of busy with her own personal stuff, so she hasn't been able to visit. I've had on Greta Aurora as well. I just try to get a lot of kind of people, and I'm going to. I can't tell you who it is, but I'm going to interview someone in the first week of September. Go to my subscribe star and become a member to find out who it is, so you can ask questions on to her, and I'll ask them on your behalf. Sorry, a bit of a plug. I know it's not where it was going, but I had to make a plug.
And I can making the assumption that it's not Kamala Harris.
Well, I should probably
Uh,
do one where I have like a fake Kamala Harris, and she's just like yeah, I don't know. It sounds like a funny idea for a parody interview, but I don't know. But yeah, I do serious interviews a lot of the time. But most of the time, I just want to just hang out, chat, and just just try and have like a more relaxed two-way conversation sort of an environment. Really, it's not just me asking questions and check them off and that kind of thing. So.
yeah. I mean, I actually had a funny thought in my head. I said, imagine if Monica Lewinsky became a Republican,
Hmm.
Joe Biden died and Kamala Harris got in, and then Monica Lewinsky like won the primaries and it became Monica Lewinsky versus Kamala Harris. So it would be the battle of two women that got famous by essentially sucking a more famous guy's dick.
This the Yeah, I'm not clever enough to come up with a good headline for that. Yeah, battle
So,
of the suckers, I guess. I don't know.
well, Kamala's motto is sometimes you have to give head in order to get ahead.
Yeah.
Um, which I mean, what's funny is like sometimes you'll say that, and people will say, "Well, you're only going after the woman for doing that. Why not the man for being, for soliciting that?" I'm like, I mean, I go after the man as well because, for one, that's not meritocracy. I get that. And I think it's a stupid thing overall because, I mean, the guy's dooming himself if she's not really good at the job, and he's giving people raises on that. I mean, he's giving people promotions on that basis alone. He's being an idiot.
Hmm. Yeah, sounds like
So,
a PUA actually.
yeah. So I go after the men as well, but it's more funny to me to go after the women because then I'll get feminists that'll be screeching at me, and and I live for that.
Well, these gynocentric women, like they basically have been carnalizing their sexuality for a very incredibly long time now. So I'm less sympathetic about the whole, trying to take it easy on them, that kind of thing, or just kind of ragging on them in particular. So I don't necessarily feel bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not a matter of feeling bad. It's just like they'll ask me, "Well, why aren't you going after the men?" I'm saying I do go after the men. It's just much funnier to go after the women.
Hmm.
So the reactions I get, like if I knew like going after the man in a situation would initiate all the hatred that I get from women when I go after women, yeah, I would go after men more.
Well, and the women could just turn around and said that they've been taken advantage of. So they've got more of a hand to kind of hide and deal cards with. It's like
Yeah.
yeah. So again, I don't exactly feel sorry for calling the women out with more priority here.
Yeah. Well, I always like to ask them this question. What's the moral difference between Harvey Weinstein soliciting sex from female actors, essentially, and a female cop having sex with male prisoners and juveniles in a prison and juvie centers?
Mm.
And they never really can come back to me on that,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
it's funny how they only believe in the power dynamic when it's men on women. They don't ever think of it in the reverse.
They perpetually think of women as the victimized, the sacrificed, uh, the eternally helpless, and somehow they're also strong, independent women too. So,
Those strong, independent women that need no man,
hmm
but pay for my pay for my shit.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a double negative, so they really do need men, just in the worst possible way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's funny is I've gotten many feminists pissed off when I said this, and it's a true statement that I stick by to this day. It's that women are more like poor women in specific. Poor women are more dependent on men than they've been in thousands of years.
Hmm.
Is it, here's the thing, even in the Middle East currently, because let's think about it this way: if you're a poor woman in the Middle East, all you have to do is marry a man of at least moderate wealth, or at least he's average, and you'll be taken care of by that one man and maybe the men on both sides of your family. So we're talking about, maybe if you have a large family, maybe 10 guys that will be taking care of you.
Hmm.
Women in the West, they have to be taken care of by millions of men through the tax system.
Mm.
So really, who's the more independent one?
Right. Well, you know, how do I put this? Women are only as uh, independent as the men that they enslave. It's all vicarious and kind of done really remotely. You know, it's really kind of I had a hard time expressing forming the words here for that one, but it's like you know when I hear about women talking about how they don't need actual men in their lives to do anything, well, they're still using the men, like they'll probably have movers to move from apartment to apartment. They still have men are somehow involved, women too, but men are also involved in like the food that they would get. I was just kind of thinking back on some kind of Japanese sort of uh, some interview with some woman off the street, I guess, like who professes to be modern uh, and living single, I suppose. They were just talking about how they don't necessarily need a man, that they just can't that to do anything, that they just can't do anything themselves. But in a way, in terms of infrastructure, possibly benefits financially from the government, you know, there's no way that a woman could be totally 100% independent in this way, you know. So it's a boring talking point for me.
Yeah, and what's funny is like they'll like, because I also advocate for parental surrender.
Hmm.
Sometimes the rights movement, they call it paternal surrender. I call it parental surrender in general,
Hmm.
because the option should be up for women as well in a way. Because it's, for me, it's already really there, but I like to just flesh it out.
Hmm.
Um, where And what's funny is, like, I've seen so many women say, "Well, men have to pay for women's child support because of all the biological differences." And I'm like, who is more responsible for not getting pregnant? the one person that can never get pregnant or the person that can get pregnant, at least.
Right.
I mean, I actually like to use this analogy. Who is more like I'm allergic to shellfish.
Mm-hmm.
If I eat shellfish, my tongue will swell up, and I'll lose the taste. I'll lose my ability to taste for a couple of hours.
Uh,
Now, who is more responsible for me not eating shellfish? Myself or everyone else?
right.
I mean, and I just make that point. It's like my allergy, just like a woman's pregnancy, they're both unique to me. And no one can know the risk like I do for myself and how a woman would know for herself.
Yeah. This conversation is kind of reminding me of somebody that my wife and I knew. Basically, who we were having this dinner with some family friends and stuff like that, and well, this one of them was basically super adamant about the restaurant items being not gluten free and was giving the servers a lot of hell for just not having gluten free stuff or something to that effect, or just being very picky. It's like this conversation is reminding me of that. Basically, it's like why are we expecting the world to bend to your will?
Yeah,
That's what I'm kind of getting from this.
yeah. And that's how I sort of get from it's like, the only person in this relationship that can get pregnant, your fertility better than any man that you'll ever be with.
Right.
I mean, so that's why I don't really mind saying that women have more of a responsibility not to get pregnant.
Hmm.
But I mean, I have said this before. I've said, like, a man's responsibilities after a pregnancy has taken place. I've said the most he should be held responsible for is paying half the medical bill for the pregnancy.
Half being the key. Yeah.
Yeah, half. Because that is where that's where his contribute, because he's responsible halfway for the pregnancy.
Hmm.
Now, after the pregnancy is over and the child's been born, like, the woman can already give up the child without permission.
Right.
So I said, why can't the man do the same thing? If the woman can, without the man's permission, give up the child for adoption, or she can put it in a safe haven, or the numerous other ways she can get out of her parental obligations, why can't men have one?
Right. Yeah.
Like, literally, even if you granted men parental surrender, women would still have more options than men.
Hmm.
It would just help more to balance the playing field. It wouldn't I don't think it could ever completely balance the playing field, but it would help.
Yeah. Yeah. To be sure.
Yeah,
One thing that's coming to mind right now is that a lot of a pop feminist talking point is that the father doesn't really seem to matter in the parental and even sometimes even in the genetic sense. But if they don't matter, well, they're still trying to press men to be quote unquote responsible by paying an absurd amount in child support and having him being fronting. Virtually all the bills in a relationship with a woman, regardless if she has a child with him or not. So
yeah. And what's funny is people never look at the origins of child support. Basically, the origin of child support outside of British poor laws, which is sort of
mhm.
also they originate, it was
Yeah.
all based on the assumption that women are children and they can't take care of children on their own, so they need a man's support.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's basically uh, like contextualized and solidified practical pedophilia here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, I mean, maybe that's why they're kind of bringing on the whole pedophile acceptance thing.
Well, here's what the messed up thing is like they'll always say women were treated like second class citizens in history, and they'll bring up even in modern times, like with the Taliban and stuff. I'm like, even in the Taliban, women are not treated like second-class citizens. They're treated like children. That unless you think all children are treated like second-class citizens, you can't really make that argument.
Right.
I mean, I
yeah.
don't think it's right. I don't think it's right that women are treated like children, of course. But I'm like, there's a difference between saying, hey, we need to stop treating women as a different class and treating them more like, extending them up to the man class than saying, oh, that they're treated as second class.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's completely the reality is that it's really contrary. Men and women are in fact treated as different types of different classes of human being, but uh, no, the gynocentric culture can't seem to decide whether women are uh, like high up goddess figures or children. So it's this really amorphous thing in which they never equal to the man because and men are somehow also subhuman sometimes as well. That's why they're disposable and everything. So men are basically kind of who cares, and women are whatever the hell they want them to be, but it's always above the man, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always like to point out this way with traditionalist and feminist. I've always liked to say that the differences between traditionalist and feminist is like the difference between Catholicism and Protestantism. They're both reading the same exact book that's misandric. They just come to different interpretations of that book.
Right.
Like, for example, the conservatives will, the traditionalists will pick up the book and they'll say, hey, look, all these men were knights in shining armor and were given all this immense respect. And men nowadays suck. We really need to, men need to go back to sacrificing themselves like they did back then. And whereas feminists, what they'll say, they'll read that exact same part of men being knights and stuff, and they'll say, men were dicks and assholes back then. Men need to sacrifice themselves now in order to, as compensation for how they acted back then.
It's very similar to a point that I had about the difference between traditionalists and feminists. So traditionalists and feminists both want men dead. Only the traditionalists thank the men for dying.
Yeah. I mean, that's sad but true.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah.
And I like to point out, like, I mean, if you want to know how bad gynocentrism is, I've actually pointed this out. Is that even with slaves, there were more, like in America, for example, even during slavery, there were more laws protecting female slaves than there were male slaves.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get this really straight. Even slave owners were respected women more than they did men, even though the men undeniably made them most likely worked more for them.
That seems to be the case, and it's beyond this whole slavery thing. Like any given kind of minority grievance, the women generally get the top billing in the in whatever grievance it is. Like say it's like a race issue or something like that. When the racism happens and the victim is a man, it's just a racism issue. When it's like let's say for instance a black woman that's victimized, then it's a woman's issue now. So it professes to have domination. Women, women, the fact that someone's a woman will have primacy and priority and domination over the fact that the racism might actually be gender neutral, perhaps, if that made sense.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, to deviate back to the abortion issue for a bit, like I've heard many feminists still say, can you name one way men's bodily autonomy is being threatened, like how women's are? I'm like, I can give you about 4 or 5 off the top of my head. Like, for one, conscription. 2, draconian child support laws, because they're basically saying we're going to throw you in a rape cell if you don't pay us.
Uh-huh.
And also, what people don't know about child support laws is that a stated purpose of child support was because they have the assumption that, hey, if we don't make men responsible for these children, they're just going to go out and have orgies and all this sex and have lots of babies,
Uh-huh.
which is stupid because um, the only men that can afford to have those lavish orgies and stuff are the type of men that can afford the best lawyers to get out of child support.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's stupid on the face of it because even in polygamous cultures, for example, only about like at most 30% of men partake in it.
Uh-huh.
70%, so that's at the most. The common average is like 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
So even in cultures that are very more in line with men having lots of sex, even most of men in those cultures are not doing it.
Right. Yeah. Because here's the thing about polygamy and polyamory and stuff like that. It's like it's not so much of a moral issue or a pair bonding issue. It's an economic issue. It's nobody has the time to. Nobody has the resources. Nobody has the actual time and space for any of this to kind of run smoothly. They have to be like ridiculously rich to even come close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I always like to point out, like, the fact is that I mean, even when Christians point out how polygamy was accepted in the Bible, I like to point out, can you list me all the people in the Bible that did polygamy and they'll do it? And I said, you know one trending pattern with all those men? They'll say, what? They're all rich.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, literally, Abraham, Moses, Jacob, Isaac, all of them rich. Oh, and by the Solomon and David, since they're both kings, obviously rich.
Uh-huh.
So if you point out a list, like, and people are actually like, so yeah, most men back then were not doing polygamy.
Uh-huh.
There wouldn't be enough
Yeah.
to do that with.
Yeah, right. And the whole conversation is also moot because I don't think most should actually get married because the consequences of divorce are just too bad. The consequences of marriage are often too bad. So there's too much subordinating one's own life to the demands of the marriage, and it's kind of this is why I'm more supportive of MGTOW all the time because there's so much to live for men. There's so much in the world to just experience that it's rare that a marriage is conducive to that.
Yeah. Well, don't you know? Happy wife, happy life.
Oh God, fuck ass. Oh my God, it's no.
Yeah. Or
Yeah, you just have no words for how stupid that expression is. It's just.
Yeah. Or mama ain't happy, then no one's happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the two big slogans.
Yeah. Which they don't. Well, funny people don't realize is that people will just say those lines just casually and like if they're just innocent. I'm sounding, and I point out to them, what you're really saying there is that female abuse is okay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. They're expecting unhinged, cave troll, gargantuan woman going berserk, unless you appease Her Majesty with whatever.
Yeah, which I mean, I've always just sort of. I always remember when Paul Elam, he pointed that out. I laughed because he has his own special way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did an interview with Paul Elam. He was a great guest. I also did one with Hannah Wallen myself,
Mm-hmm.
and Hannah Wallen, we went on for like 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't intentional. I was only preparing to go for like an hour, and we just ended up getting for the 4 hour mark.
Mm.
Yeah, but when it comes to the race issue and stuff, what often people don't realize is like if America is a racist institution, it's very selectively racist.
Well, it's
Because
hypocritically racist for sure. Yes.
well, I mean, because let's think about it this way: I'm a white man, and statistically speaking, if I were in my car driving my black girlfriend and a cop pulled me over, it is far more likely statistically that I'm going to be the one arrested and shot than my black girlfriend is.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
Yeah.
and that's so. I mean, what does that say if that means that cops are like supposedly racist cops are more fine with shooting and arresting white men than they are black women?
Well, in terms of the consequences, it doesn't get any kind of traction. You know, white white people get killed by uh,
Cops more.
yeah cops who are you know not exercising discipline all the time. Like there's been see names fail me here, but there was this one instance where a person who was mentally challenged was basically killed in a very similar manner, I think, to George Floyd, how he was supposedly killed, and this is minus the drugs and everything. And nobody's had a vigil for him. Nobody's right. I'm not asking for riots, by the way, but nobody was rioting. Nope. And this is coming from someone who was within uh, driving distance from where that liquor store was torched and that police department was burned down. I was uh, living in St. Paul, Minnesota, and there's been riots that I've seen the riots happen in real time. I've seen convenience stores being looted. This is turning into a tangent here, but I have to rant. It's why we left St. Paul, by the way. There was a gas station within walking distance that was burned down because somebody just used the whole George Floyd situation as an excuse, to terrorize the neighborhood. And this is why it makes me so mad that people would, go to a vigil for a criminal who has had a criminal history, and white guys who die due to no real fault of their own, get nothing. So, fuck Black Lives Matter. It's a dishonest slogan because the real slogan really is that only Black Lives Matter. So sorry, I'm getting kind of ranty here, but I'm just really pissed about that whole situation.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, yeah, people will say, well, of course more white people are shot. There are more white people. And I'm like, the police don't police the entire population of America. They can't. What cops do is they have what they call crime hotspots, or what they call like demanding spots, where they go to where there are places where people are contacting them more.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, that's just because what's the one thing about real estate that they tell you? It's about location, location, location.
Right.
It's it's stupid. Like it would be stupid of the cops to prioritize going in areas they wouldn't be needed at,
Mm-hmm.
because that would be just wasteful. So they go to places where there's a demand for them,
Right.
and so they don't like they could not police the entire population even if they wanted to, because like even if we're going a low ball, I mean, even if we're going high ball estimate of cops in America, it's about 1 million cops.
Right. Right.
There's 420 Americans, 420 million Americans, which if we're counting the cops along with that, there'd be like 419 million. So essentially, you'd be having to have like one cop for every 419 people.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
To be sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's they more or less have hot spots where they gather up to, and they spread resources from that. That's just smart. That's just logical economic sense. You're not going to put resources somewhere where you're not going to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's in the what people don't realize about. I mean, I was all for what they call him, Derek Chauvin, going to prison. And now, I didn't think he should get the murder charge. I thought he would get like manslaughter, because that was more easily provable, in my opinion. Um, what's funny is like they were saying, well, this man is such a racist, and I'm like, you do realize he had an Asian wife.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. I mean, the thing about the thing that sticks in my craw about the Derek Chauvin trial is that it's kind of clear to me that the jury was kind of browbeaten into giving that verdict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I accepted the verdict because, I mean, I think it is a consistent thing, because men's rights groups are always, we're talking about where we fight for better treatment for men under the law. And we're about, evaluating the evidence. And I thought he should go to prison. There was a lot of messed things that he did.
Well, that's fair enough. But the thing about the whole George Floyd thing is that, well, didn't he basically shoplift?
No, George Floyd, he got in trouble for the reason why they got him, because he was apparently making counterfeit money.
Uh-huh. Well,
Which,
but he used the counterfeit money.
yeah.
Okay.
Which is what I find funny about counterfeit money is basically it's illegal for, let's say, me to make fake money and basically devalue the dollar by making a lot of fake money. Yet the government can print out more and more money and make the dollar worthless as well.
Yeah, I get your point, right?
So basically,
But
I'm not allowed to make counterfeit money and make the dollar worthless, but the government is.
that's fair enough point. Yeah, but then again, like I would kind of interpret this particular situation alternative. I'm not talking about the counterfeit, but the government versus some person. But like would it not be fair to assess that Derek Chauvin basically did as a police officer what I, as the store owner, would have done instead? Like, basically, this kind of idea of just apprehending somebody, or just like I don't mean kill, but take down somebody that was trying to steal from your store with the counterfeit money. How
Well,
is that different from like getting somebody who is trying to rob your store and like stabbing him in the gut or something?
yeah. I mean, personally, in my opinion, I thought George Floyd should have gotten killed when he tried to, he put like a gun to a pregnant woman's belly,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like
Yep.
robbery.
Yep.
If Chauvin would have had a gun there, I would have supported killing him on that day.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but I thought the way that, I mean, obviously, I don't know. I know he must have not reformed too much, because he was still doing what got him into the situation of putting the gun to the woman's belly before he died, because
Mm-hmm.
they found fentanyl in his system.
Right. Yeah. Like there's been some debate at first about whether that was the thing that killed him or not, but I don't know, like as the trial and uh, the thing kind of had to everything had the time to settle in. I'm just wondering if that wasn't like a big contributor to his own death. I think.
I think I mean, it could be both a bit, because I imagine
Mm.
if you're taking drugs, if a cop forces you to, like, because many cops have had been trained about this when it comes to cocaine use.
Mhm.
Cops aren't supposed to be really, really, like, shaking up a person that's on cocaine and stuff, because their heart rate's already, you know, probably going off the
Yeah.
end. And so if
Yeah.
you shut up even more, you're going to give them a heart attack.
Right. Right.
So they're told to be more careful, and I think that's what was the problem.
Mhm.
They were more aggressive than they needed to be in that situation. What they should have done is they should have just had him like, hey, go on the ground, like, just sit there, count. We're gonna watch you, but we're not going to restrain you. Just chill
Right.
out a minute.
Yeah.
If they would have done that, I would have been more for that, given the situation. But they had to be more aggressive than I think they needed to be.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. To shift focus a bit here, it's like I still can't stand the public response to it in the immediate area. Like, there's been a lot of graffiti in that St. Paul area, right? By the way, businesses were boarded up because they were fearing like riots and everything like that. And one of the graffitis that I just can't get over how retarded and stupid it is like the slogan "I can't breathe," right? And you know the graffiti attaches heart symbols on it, and this is starting to sound like some kind of BDSM thing, you know.
mhm.
Right, so it's just the reaction to the killing and everything like that, aside from the already uh you know indefensible rioting, is just that you know people are kind of doing this whole peace and love bullshit to a criminal who died where he need not have, gotten himself into, in a situation he had not gotten himself into, and it just reveals the state of mind of the people who would do these kind of graffitis and this kind of retarded social justice kind of thing. It's like they just don't know what they're doing. They don't know. They can't distinguish BDSM from tragedy, I suppose. I don't even know what I'm going to say here. It's just so. It's just something that's stuck in my mind. It's just so stupid.
Well, what I've always found funny is like when some people, like I've told men, if they're gonna do the whole BDSM thing, make sure to film the entire thing,
Yeah.
because there are many women that will do that where like they'll say, hey, I want you to slap me in the face as hard as you can,
hmm
and you do that, and then when she gets a bruise on her face, she'll go to the cops the next day
Yep.
that you abused her.
Yep. So the solution here is that we all need to become pornographers. We have to film every sex act we do at this point because we just don't know. You know.
I mean, I
Uh,
was doing that beforehand, so hey,
yeah. Yeah. There you
but
go. Yeah.
well, that and following the Billy Graham rule will save a lot of men's lives.
hmm Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
You
mean,
think I'm kidding, but I'm not.
I'm not even a religious man. I still think the Billy Graham rule is probably one of the most ingenious rules that men have ever came up with.
Can you explain more on that Billy Graham rule then?
It's also called the Mike Pence rule as well,
Oh, okay.
where basically the motto is that never be, if you're a man, never be in a room alone with a woman unless you have like, you say your wife or just another observer in the room with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, the other observer could be a camera. So,
Yeah, that as well. Well, I mean, if you're into the voyeurism thing, I mean, hey, knock yourself out. But
yeah.
it's just make sure to always have a witness of some kind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that's more than reasonable, you know?
I mean, at this point, unless trust can be regained in between men and women, it just like that's just gonna how it's gonna have to be.
Yeah, to be sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad that it has to come to that, but it's the state of the world as we are now.
Well, yeah. Well, like I said not long ago that we should all become pornographers, so we can actually we can now actually accuse the conservatives of being against women's accountability because they're not allowing us to be pornographers because they're so anti-porn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I always just found it just sort of. I mean, what's the difference between? I mean, here's what's funny in America: if you go to a woman to have sex and there's no camera, like if you pay a woman for sex and there's no camera, it's prostitution. You can get thrown in jail.
Mhm.
If you pay a woman to have sex with you and you film it, oh, then she's just an actor, and that's okay.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I should mention is that there's this law called, I think it was called 2287. That's the record keeping law, right? So if you actually, that part is true that, if you're filming it, then she's just an actor. But if you release it, you have to have those records in a storage and with a identifiable address and organized in a specific way, else you're committing child pornography, apparently. That's how
Yeah,
convoluted that law is.
well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just. I also find it funny is because whenever people are going on about anti-porn stuff, they'll always look at it through the lens of female victimhood. They'll say,
Exactly.
"Oh, men are objectifying women sexually," and I'm saying, "Well, aren't women objectifying men financially?"
Yeah, to be sure. Yep.
So I mean, well, basically, what you're saying is it's perfectly fine. I mean, it's perfectly immoral for me to view a woman for sex, but it's perfectly moral for her to view me as a wallet.
Yeah. And let's go further than that. It's like, um, what we call porn, sexy imagery has been like the human condition for as far back before recorded history, really. It's like, you know, uh, all it is, it's just men just drawing stuff and having fun, really, right? And the technology makes it seem like it's worse than it is, really. It's like people think it's this kind of public health crisis. No. The technology proliferates it quite a bit, but in the end, it's just the same song and dance. It's all about the male imagination at work, basically. So if you're anti-porn, you're against that mental freedom on the part of the men, and you're against male sexuality and the imagination thereof being active as it needs to be. You know.
I also made the joke is like, um, yeah, I also made the joke like I was saying, where if you film a woman you're paying to have sex with you, it's pornography. If you don't, it's prostitution. And
Yeah.
if you marry the prostitute, then it's just marriage.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
also,
Marriage is kind of worse in some ways.
yeah, and also, well, I said I made this joke to Lauren from the Honey Badger community. Um,
Yeah.
I made the joke that said, "What's the difference between a wife and a prostitute? A prostitute gets a wage, a wife gets a salary."
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've been going on for more than an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I thought I would wrap this up a bit.
Yeah, that's fine. I really enjoyed chatting. It just, clearly there's more stuff to talk about in the future.
Yeah, we can maybe schedule this for another time in the future.
Yeah, to be sure. Like, just hit me up anytime.
Yeah. All right. So can you tell the audience where they can find you?
All right. So I've got a few. So in terms of social media, uh, I used to not be on Twitter because I was kind of sick and tired of it, but I came back. I'm V underscore the number 4 underscore Vernon at Twitter. And I know nobody uses places like Gab, Getter, and Parlor so much anymore. We all thought it was going to be the big alternative social media platforms. They're not. But in case you wanted to get there, find me there and everything like that, on Gab, I'm V4 Vernon. Actual words V4 Vernon, no spaces. Same with Getter, and I believe Parlor is the same thing. Uh,
And
YouTube, yeah, YouTube wise, yeah, just V for Vernon. That's my YouTube, and I'm also on BitChute and Rumble. So those are the places you can find me, basically. And I've got a Subscribestar account as well. It's subscribestar.com.v-4-Vernon. Yeah, there's some perks to being a member, but even $1 tiers, that really helps me out. So that's just yeah, those are the places you can find me.
yeah, all right. Do you have any projects coming up that you would like to tell the audience about?
Good grief. So right now I have a due date, a deadline that I've set for August 21st of my second solo home demo EP called Cosmic Scorpion. It's going to be, it's basically like a compilation album of just some stuff I'm working on. It's a intermediate between my previous solo home recording, Echoes of Inner Space, and the one coming after that. Basically, it's kind of a taste of how it's going to sonically transition, I suppose. But so that's going on, and like I said before, I've got an interview with somebody high profile in the men's movement coming up in the first week of September. So watch out for that one. And in terms of projects, well, that's all I can really report on, to be sure, actually. So yeah, there we go.
All right. Well, everyone, make sure to check out Vernon here. This was a nice conversation. And yeah, this is Mr. Brass. This is the Brass Exchange saying goodbye and get wise.